Well, this is Virginia Hughes. She's a science writer and blogger. She's written for Discover, Nature, and blogs for PBS's Nova, the Smithsonian, and others. She has her own website, virginiahughes.com. She just got out of a session titled Science Journalism Online, Better or Merely Different. Can you tell me a bit about that session and how it went?
Sure. I think, just judging from the comments I just got out of it, I think it was a really lively session. We had some pillars of science journalism, some of the people I've looked up to for years: Steve Silberman, John Rennie, David Dobbs, and then Ed Yong, who's like a major blogger. So I think the session basically was about how journalism is adapting to this new online world and this blogging phenomenon. And there was there was a nice conversation about the financial aspect of how journalists are going to survive. Steve Silberman gave this really great story about how he had worked for Wired, had a contract with them for like 14 years, and then he wrote this awesome feature about placebos, and then his contract was not re-upped. And it's sort of a heart-wrenching story of someone so talented who even he can't manage to hold down this permanent position. So I think there was a lot of good discussion. I think there could have been more. I mean, unfortunately, in an hour you can't really get them to any grand solutions or anything, but I thought it was a good session.
Well, great. Well, going into that, what areas would you have liked to talk about or think would have been good to discuss that there just wasn't time for?
So I guess my own personal plug, what I had talked about briefly, was that online I often am frustrated as a reader and as someone who pitches stories that there's not enough labeling by major media outlets of what is blogging versus not blogging, and what blogging is. Like, what is the definition of a blog on a certain site? And I think there needs to be much more thinking involved. A lot of, I think, media outlets just throw up a blog or a blog network because they think it's like the trendy thing to do, or that they need to do it to survive, without doing enough thinking about what kind of content it's going to have, what kind of writing it's going to have, what standards they're going to have, and how they're going to be transparent about all of that to the reader. And so there were a lot of people in the room who run these networks, and I would have loved to hear from them about, are they having these discussions? It's enormously difficult, I know, but I would like to see much more of that.
Well, writing for so many sources, including many blogs, have you been able to find an answer, or how do you define that?
It's really hard.
Answer?
I actually just started blogging, make a plug for a group blog called The Last Word on Nothing this year, which is it's a great blog of science writers. And every time I come up with a story idea, I have to now make a decision about, is this appropriate for the blog? Should I pitch this to a news outlet? Should I look into this further for a few more weeks and pitch it as a feature story? It's like, how do I make these decisions? There's some things that are very easy, like if it's a new science paper that's pretty cut and dry, I'm going to pitch that as a news story to a news outlet. Or if it's a trend piece about a new theory or something, that's usually a good feature pitch. But what to put on the blog, you do consider what would drive traffic, what are people going to what's going to catch somebody's attention immediately, that kind of thing. I think everyone comes at it in a different way. I tend to pick the quirky, more beautiful things on the blog, things about culture or art or weird forensic science, stuff that doesn't immediately have a why now or a real world impact.
Going with that, can you tell me about a story that you've worked on recently or that you've completed recently that you've really enjoyed or thought that was very interesting?
Sure. I have a feature coming out in the March issue of Popular Science that's about the skin microbiome, which is all of the bacteria and viruses and fungi that live on our skin, and how they might be playing a role in eczema and asthma and allergies, and the enormous the rise in those diseases in the last few decades. And so I went to this woman's lab at the NIH, and I got a tour of all these people who are sequencing the genes of bacteria, and it was a great story because it's the numbers are so enormous of the number that gets thrown around all the time is that there's 10 for every one of our own cells. There's 10 bacterial cells on our body, so we're really like not even us. We're like mostly them. That was really fun to report on. It was a great feature because it had a human. I interviewed a boy who's 14 who has eczema and had a really severe case of eczema who's in the study, but it also had this great, really great science, interesting science.
Well, cool. That sounds really neat. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.